The missile screamed through the blizzard and slammed into the FBI helicopter's tail. Special Agent Sarah Brennan clutched the 7-month-old baby against her chest as the aircraft spun violently, metal shrieking alarms wailing. "Hold on, Lily!" she screamed into the chaos. 20 miles north, Navy SEAL Lieutenant Marcus Cole heard the fractured distress call through his radio, 3 words that would change everything. "Baby, terrorists, help." He looked down at his K9 partner, Titan. The Belgian Malinois was already on his feet, muscles coiled ready to charge into hell itself. What none of them knew was that someone inside the FBI had betrayed them all. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. Subscribe now and stay until the very end, because this story of loyalty, sacrifice, and courage will stay with you forever. Your support means the world to us. The helicopter was dying. Sarah Brennan felt it in her bones before the alarms confirmed it. That sickening lurch, the sudden weightlessness, the world tilting sideways in a way that defied everything she knew about flight. "No, no, no!" She yanked the cyclic hard right, her knuckles white against the control. The instrument panel screamed red warnings out at her. Stabilizer failure, hydraulic pressure dropping, altitude critical. The baby in the carrier strapped to her chest began to cry. "It's okay, Lily." Sarah gasped, though nothing was okay. I've got you, sweetheart." The missile had come from nowhere, a streak of orange fire through the white curtain of the blizzard, too fast to evade, too precise to be anything but deliberate. It had clipped the tail rotor and sent them spinning into oblivion. Someone had known their flight path. Someone had tried to murder a 7-month-old child. Sarah fought the controls with everything she had. 15 years of flying 3 combat tours, countless hours in simulators that tried to prepare pilots for moments exactly like this, and none of it felt like enough. The helicopter bucked and screamed, dropping through the storm like a wounded bird. "Come on!" she growled through clenched teeth. "Come on, you piece of—" The trees appeared without warning, dark shadows exploding through the white. Sarah barely had time to pull up before the skids caught the first branches. The impact threw her forward, her harness cutting into her shoulders. Lily's cry became a shriek. Then came the real crash. The helicopter slammed into the mountainside with a force that drove the breath from Sarah's lungs. Metal crumpled. Glass shattered. The world became a tumbling nightmare of snow and fire and deafening noise. And then silence. Sarah opened her eyes. Blood ran down her face from a cut somewhere above her hairline. Her left leg screamed with pain broken. She knew instantly the angle wrong beneath the crushed console. But her arms were still wrapped around Lily's carrier. The baby was still crying. "Thank God," Sarah whispered. "Thank God, thank God, thank God." She fumbled with shaking hands, checking Lily's tiny body for injuries. The thermal blankets had protected her. The carrier had held. Lily's face was red and twisted with terror, but she was alive. She was whole. "You're okay, sweetheart. We're okay." But they weren't okay. Sarah knew it even as she said it. The helicopter was destroyed. Her leg was shattered. They were somewhere in the Cascade Mountains during the worst blizzard in a decade. And the people who had shot them down would be coming to finish the job. 20 miles north, Lieutenant Marcus Cole stopped mid-stride. Titan froze beside him. The Belgian Malinois' ears pricked forward, his body suddenly rigid with alertness. "Easy, boy," Marcus murmured, but his own instincts were screaming. Something was wrong. Something had changed in the mountain's rhythm. They were 3 days into a reconnaissance mission tracking a suspected weapons smuggling route through the Cascades. Boring work mostly. Surveillance. Observation. The kind of mission the brass gave you when they wanted you out of the way, but couldn't justify keeping you sidelined completely. Marcus knew why he was really here. The Syria incident still hung over his head like a guillotine. He'd disobeyed direct orders to save a child soldier from an ISIS compound. The kid had lived. 3 of Marcus's teammates had died in the extraction. The review board had called it heroic but reckless. His commanding officer had called it career suicide. 6 months of administrative recovery later, and here he was babysitting a mountain pass while the real operators ran real missions. His radio crackled. Marcus stopped breathing. The sound was wrong, fractured, desperate, the kind of transmission that came from damaged equipment or dying operators. He'd heard it before in places he tried not to remember. Static. Then a voice female breaking apart. FBI, down, need immediate. Marcus grabbed the radio, adjusting the frequency. Say again, repeat your transmission. More static. Then 3 words that hit him like a punch to the chest. Baby, terrorists, help. Titan whined low and urgent. The dog could hear it too, the desperation, the fear. Animals knew when death was circling. Marcus's training kicked in automatically. Triangulate the signal, assess the situation, contact command for backup, and await further orders. That was protocol. That was what a good soldier did. But Marcus Cole hadn't been a good soldier since Syria. He'd been a haunted one. He was already moving before he made the conscious decision, his legs carrying him toward the signal's origin. Titan fell into step beside him, the dog's earlier tension transformed into focused purpose. Titan search. The command was unnecessary. Titan was already tracking his nose, working the frozen air, his powerful body cutting through snow that reached Marcus's knees. The Belgian Malinois had been with Marcus for 4 years, through 3 deployments and 1 nightmare that had nearly killed them both. The scar on Titan's right shoulder was a twin to the one on Marcus's chest. Same explosion, same shrapnel, same moment when they'd each thought the other was dead. They didn't need words anymore. They barely needed commands. They were 2 halves of the same wounded animal. The storm tried to push them back. Wind screamed through the trees, driving ice crystals into Marcus's face like tiny knives. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. The temperature was falling fast, -20, maybe colder with the wind chill. A lesser man would have turned back. Marcus kept walking. In Washington, D.C., Deputy Director Alan Frost stared at his phone with the expression of a man watching his own funeral. The message was simple. Helicopter down. No confirmation of kills. Sending team to verify. His hand trembled as he set the phone on his desk. 52 years old, 30 years with the Bureau, and it had come to this sitting in his corner office praying that a baby would die in a blizzard. How it had gotten so far, he knew how. He remembered every step, every compromise, every small betrayal that had led him here. It had started with money. It always started with money. His wife's cancer. The experimental treatment's insurance wouldn't cover the mounting bills that threatened to destroy everything they'd built. Then the offer had come. Not from criminals that would have been too obvious, too easy to refuse. It had come from men in expensive suits who spoke about national security and necessary sacrifices. Men who understood that sometimes the system needed people willing to bend the rules. Just information at first. Nothing that would get anyone killed. Flight schedules, security protocols, the kind of things that could be explained away as interdepartmental cooperation if anyone ever asked. No one ever asked. The money appeared in offshore accounts. His wife got her treatments. The cancer went into remission, and Alan Frost told himself he was still a good man, just a pragmatic one. Then came the Chen situation. Dr. James and Dr. Michelle Chen, two CDC scientists who had stumbled onto something they shouldn't have. A bioweapon program, domestic terrorists with connections to foreign cells, money trails that led to people who couldn't afford to be exposed. The Chens had evidence. The Chens were going to talk. And the Chens had a 7-month-old daughter named Lily. "The child has to disappear," the voice on the phone had told him. "Clean, untraceable. An accident during evacuation." Alan had wanted to refuse. He'd opened his mouth to say no, to draw a line, to remember who he'd been before the money, and the fear had hollowed him out. But he'd thought about his wife, about the cancer that could come back, about the accounts that could be exposed, about the prison cell that waited for men like him. He'd leaked the flight path. Now he sat in his office watching the snow fall outside his window and waited to find out if he was a murderer. Sarah had managed to free herself from the wreckage, but the effort had nearly broken her. Her leg was definitely shattered. The bone had torn through skin, somewhere below her knee, and she'd had to bite through her lip to keep from screaming as she dragged herself out of the crushed cockpit. Blood loss was becoming a problem. Cold was becoming a bigger one. Lily had stopped crying, which scared Sarah more than the screaming had. "Stay with me, baby girl," she whispered, tucking the carrier deeper into her jacket. "You stay with me." The radio was destroyed. The emergency beacon had been crushed in the impact. Her cell phone showed no signal, not that she'd expected one this deep in the mountains. They were alone, injured, freezing, with killers on their way. Sarah had been in bad situations before. She'd been shot at over Afghanistan. She'd crash-landed a helicopter in a sandstorm. She'd survived a training accident that had killed 2 of her classmates. But she'd never been responsible for a baby's life. She'd never felt so completely, utterly helpless. "Think, Sarah," she growled at herself. "Think." She needed shelter. She needed warmth. She needed to move before whoever shot them down came to confirm the kill. But she couldn't walk, could barely crawl. Every movement sent lightning bolts of agony through her shattered leg. So she started dragging herself through the snow, one arm wrapped around Lily, the other clawing at the frozen ground. Inch by inch, foot by foot, leaving a trail of blood that the storm was slowly erasing. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she couldn't stop. The mercenary team moved through the blizzard like ghosts. 12 men, led by an operative known only as Viper, were converging on the crash site from 3 directions. They wore winter camouflage and carried enough firepower to start a small war. Thermal drones buzzed overhead, fighting the wind to provide intelligence. Viper checked his tablet, studying the drone feed with cold, professional eyes. The helicopter was definitely down a twisted heap of metal and smoke, barely visible through the snow. No movement around the wreckage. "Alpha team approach from the north ridge," he said into his radio. "Bravo team cover the eastern approach. Charlie team with me." "What about survivors?" one of his men asked. Viper's expression didn't change. "There won't be any." He was a man who had stopped asking questions long ago. Questions led to doubt. Doubt led to hesitation. Hesitation got people killed, usually the wrong people. The job was the job. The target was the target. Everything else was noise. "Sir." The voice belonged to Ghost, his second in command. She was a tall woman with short, dark hair and eyes that had seen too much death to feel anything anymore. Or so she'd thought. The contractor specified the infant as primary target. Confirmation will be difficult in these conditions. Then we make it easy. Anyone we find, we eliminate. Woman-child doesn't matter. No witnesses. Ghost nodded, but something flickered behind her eyes, something she quickly buried. She had her own reasons for doing this work, reasons she didn't examine too closely. The team moved out. Marcus found the crash site 40 minutes later. The helicopter was unrecognizable, a crumpled mass of metal and shattered glass half buried in a snowdrift. Smoke still rose from the engine compartment, a thin gray column fighting against the wind. Titan circled the wreckage nose, working frantically. The dog whined, then barked once his signal for a human scent trail. "Show me, boy." The trail led away from the helicopter toward a dense stand of pines. Marcus followed it, his heart hammering against his ribs. Blood in the snow. Lots of it. Whoever had survived the crash was badly hurt. He found her 50 yards from the wreckage. She was lying face down in the snow, her body curled protectively around a small bundle pressed to her chest. Her leg was twisted at an impossible angle. Blood had soaked through her flight suit and frozen in dark patches. Marcus dropped to his knees beside her. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" No response. He checked for a pulse, found one weak, thready but present. She was alive. The bundle in her arms moved. Marcus carefully peeled back the layers of thermal blankets and found himself staring into the wide, terrified eyes of a baby. The infant couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 months old. Her face was pale, her lips slightly blue, but she was breathing. She was alive. Something twisted in Marcus's chest, something he'd been trying to bury since Syria. The child soldier had been older, maybe 8 or 9, but the look in his eyes had been the same. That pure, helpless terror of the innocent caught in the crossfire of adult brutality. "It's okay," he heard himself saying. "I've got you, both of you." Titan pressed close his warm body, helping to shield the baby from the wind. The dog's amber eyes were fixed on the infant with an intensity that Marcus had never seen before, protective, almost paternal. Marcus assessed the situation with cold precision. One survivor badly injured, possibly dying. One infant hypothermic but stable. Location unknown. Communications spotty. Extraction hours away at best. And someone had tried to kill them, which meant someone would be coming to try again. He gathered the woman in his arms as carefully as he could, trying not to jostle her shattered leg. She moaned, but didn't wake. The baby whimpered, but stayed quiet, as if she somehow understood that silence was survival. "We need to move," Marcus told Titan. "Now." The dog was already heading toward the tree line, toward the best cover available. Marcus followed, carrying his burden through the storm. Behind them, the helicopter's smoke continued to rise, a beacon that would draw the hunters straight to them. Sarah woke to warmth. That was wrong. She should be cold. She should be dead. The last thing she remembered was crawling through the snow, Lily against her chest, the world going gray at the edges. "Easy. Don't try to move." The voice was male, calm, controlled. She forced her eyes open and found herself staring at a face carved from granite and shadows. Hard jaw covered in stubble. Pale blue eyes that watched her with unsettling intensity. A scar running from his temple to his chin, white against tanned skin. "Who?" Her voice came out as a croak. "Lieutenant Marcus Cole, Navy SEAL. You're safe. Lily, the baby's fine. She's right here." He gestured, and Sarah saw Lily lying in a nest of emergency blankets, a massive dog curled around her. The animal's eyes met hers, intelligent, watchful, oddly gentle. "That's Titan. He hasn't left her side since we found you." Sarah tried to sit up. Pain exploded through her leg so intense she nearly blacked out again. Strong hands caught her shoulders, easing her back down. "I told you not to move. Your leg is broken compound fracture. I've splinted it, but you need surgery." "They'll come," Sarah gasped. "The people who shot us down. They'll come." "I know." The calm in his voice was terrifying and reassuring at the same time. He said it the way another person might say, "The sky is blue," or "water is wet," a simple fact already accounted for. How many? Unknown. But they had a surface-to-air missile, which means serious funding and serious intent. They're not amateurs. They want Lily. Sarah forced the words out, needing him to understand. Her parents, the Chens, they found evidence of a bioweapon plot. Domestic terrorists. The cell wants them silenced. Lily is leverage or elimination. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Something cold and hard that hadn't been there before. "Then they'll have to go through me." It wasn't a boast. It wasn't bravado. It was a statement of fact delivered with the same flat certainty as everything else he said. Sarah looked at this stranger, this scarred, silent man, who had somehow found them in the wilderness, and was now calmly preparing to fight an unknown number of killers to protect a child he'd never met. "Why?" she asked. "Why what? Why are you helping us? You could have called for backup. Waited for extraction. Why are you?" "Because she's a baby." He said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Like the question itself was absurd. "That's it. That's your reason." Marcus looked at Lily, at Titan curled around her, at the snow, howling outside whatever shelter they were in. "I had a chance to save a kid once," he said quietly. "I took it. People died because of my choice. Good people. Friends." He paused. "The review board said I was reckless. Maybe I was. But I'd do it again. Every time. Because some things are worth any price." Sarah stared at him. "You're insane," she whispered. "Probably." He stood checking his weapon with practiced efficiency. "Get some rest if you can. I need to figure out our defensive options." He walked away, leaving Sarah alone with the baby and the dog. Outside, the blizzard raged on, and somewhere in that white hell, the hunters were getting closer. Viper reached the crash site 20 minutes after Marcus had left. He surveyed the wreckage with cold, professional assessment. The helicopter was destroyed, the cockpit crushed, but there was no body inside. Blood trails led away from the wreck toward the trees, and then vanished. Someone had survived. Someone had taken them. "Sir." One of his men approached, holding up a spent flare. "Found this in the snow. Military issue, recent." Viper examined the flare, his expression unreadable. "We have a complication." "What kind of complication?" "The kind that shoots back." He activated his radio. "All teams be advised. We have unknown military presence in the AO. Probably a single operator, possibly with K9 support. Consider armed and extremely dangerous." "Rules of engagement." Ghost's voice came through the radio. Viper's answer was immediate. "Kill on sight." He looked out into the swirling snow toward the trees where the blood trail disappeared. "Whoever you are," he thought, "you just made the worst decision of your life." Marcus found the cabin 3 miles from the crash site. It was an old ranger station, abandoned for years, half buried in snow and slowly being reclaimed by the forest. The door hung crooked on its hinges. The windows were cracked and dirty. But the walls were solid, the roof was intact, and it offered something the open mountain didn't: a defensible position. "This is it," he told Titan. "This is where we make our stand." The dog seemed to understand. He circled the cabin, once nose working, then sat at the door, a sentry taking his post. Marcus carried Sarah inside, laid her on the only piece of furniture that hadn't rotted, an ancient wooden bench against the far wall. She was conscious now, her face gray with pain, but her eyes were alert, determined. "Tell me what you need me to do," she said. "Rest. Conserve your strength. I'm not helpless. I know, but right now your job is staying alive and keeping that baby warm. Everything else is my problem." He started fortifying the cabin with systematic efficiency. Barricade the windows, clear the firing lines, set up tripwires from his survival kit, not to hurt anyone, just early warning. Mark the escape routes, identify the choke points. Sarah watched him work, memorizing his movements, learning his patterns. "How long were you planning to stay in the mountains?" she asked. "Long enough?" "That's not an answer." "Recon mission. 3 weeks. Extended surveillance." He paused, checking the sight on his rifle. "I have enough supplies for 2 people for maybe 4 days. 5 if we ration." "And if they don't find us in 5 days?" Marcus looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time. She was younger than he'd initially thought, early 30s, probably. Auburn hair coming loose from a regulation braid, green eyes that held steady despite the pain and the fear. Strong jaw, stubborn, set to her mouth. A pilot's hands, capable, precise, not helpless at all. "If they don't find us in 5 days," he said, "I'll carry you both out myself." Before Sarah could respond, Titan's head snapped up. A low growl rumbled from his chest. Marcus was at the window in 2 strides, rifle raised. Contact. Multiple thermal signatures moving through the trees. Range approximately 800 meters. "How many?" "Counting." His jaw tightened. 12. Maybe more. 12 professional killers. 1 SEAL. 1 injured pilot. 1 baby. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her face had changed. The fear was still there, but it had been pushed down, locked away, replaced by something harder. Something that recognized the odds and chose to fight anyway. "Give me your backup weapon," she said. "You can barely sit up. I can pull a trigger, and I can watch your blind spots while you're focused on the main approach." Marcus studied her for a long moment. Then without a word, he drew his sidearm and handed it to her. 15 rounds. Make them count. "I never miss." Something almost like a smile flickered across his face. "Good. Because we're going to need every bullet." Outside, the thermal signatures continued their approach, the hunters closing in on their prey. Titan rose from his position at the door, moving to stand beside Marcus. The dog's body was taut with controlled aggression, his eyes fixed on the trees beyond the window. Marcus rested a hand on the dog's head. "Easy, boy. Not yet. When they come, you stay with the baby. You protect her, no matter what." Titan pressed against his leg, a silent promise. The snow continued to fall. The killers continued to advance. And in a rundown cabin in the mountains, 3 souls prepared to fight for the smallest, most innocent life among them. Alan Frost's phone buzzed. He stared at it for a long moment before answering, dreading what he would hear. "We have a problem." Viper's voice was flat, emotionless. "There's military involvement. Navy SEAL possible K9 unit. He has the targets." Alan's blood turned to ice. "A SEAL. How is that possible?" "Unknown. Wrong place, wrong time. Doesn't matter. He's 1 man against 12. The outcome isn't in doubt." "But the mission will be completed. It may just take longer than anticipated." A pause. "I'll expect the rest of my payment within 24 hours." The line went dead. Alan lowered the phone with trembling hands. A Navy SEAL. Of course there had to be a complication. Nothing in this nightmare had gone smoothly. Why would it start now? He walked to his window, staring out at the snow falling over Washington. Somewhere out there, a man he'd never met was fighting to save a child he'd been paid to help murder. For one brief, shining moment, Alan Frost hoped the SEAL would win. Then he buried that hope, along with everything else human left inside him, and started preparing his alibis. The first attack came at midnight. Marcus had been expecting it. The mercenaries would want to use the darkness, take advantage of the storm hit hard and fast before their targets could establish any real defense. What he hadn't expected was the dogs. 3 of them came through the trees first. Massive black shapes trained for combat, silent, until the moment they lunged. Titan saw them before Marcus did a warning bark, splitting the night. Contact rear. Marcus spun rifle up and dropped the first dog mid-leap. The second was on Titan before he could fire again, the 2 animals crashing together in a snarling explosion of fur and teeth. The third came for Marcus. He caught it with his rifle stock, a brutal swing that sent the animal tumbling. It recovered impossibly fast, lunging again, jaws snapping for his throat. Marcus dropped his rifle and caught the dog's neck in both hands, wrestling with 90 pounds of trained killer. The dog's teeth found his forearm, biting through his jacket into flesh. Marcus ignored the pain. He'd felt worse. He twisted, using the dog's momentum against it, and slammed its head against the cabin wall. The animal went limp. Titan was still fighting the second dog. Marcus drew his knife and ended that fight with one precise thrust. Good boy. His voice was steady, despite the blood running down his arm. Good boy. Inside the cabin, Sarah was at the window, pistol raised. They're coming. 6 men approaching from the north. I see them. Marcus retrieved his rifle and took position. The mercenaries were using cover well, moving in disciplined pairs, but the storm was working against them too. Visibility was measured in feet, not yards. He waited. The first pair broke cover, advancing toward the cabin. Marcus fired twice. Both men dropped. Return fire exploded from the trees, rounds punching into the cabin walls, shattering what remained of the windows. Marcus dropped flat, pulling Titan down with him. Sarah was pressed against the wall below the window, pistol clutched to her chest. Lily was crying, a thin, terrified wail that cut through the gunfire. Status, Marcus called. Alive, for now. Sarah's voice was strained but steady. They're trying to flank us. I saw movement to the east. Can you cover the east window? I can barely crawl. Drag yourself. I need eyes on that approach. Sarah didn't argue. She started pulling herself across the floor, one arm cradling her shattered leg, teeth clenched against the agony. By the time she reached the east window, her face was white as the snow outside. But she raised her pistol, and she watched. Another pair of mercenaries broke from the tree line, running for the cabin's blind spot. Sarah fired. Her first shot went wide. Her second caught one man in the shoulder, spinning him around. Her third dropped him. The second man dove for cover, but he'd been seen. Marcus adjusted his position and finished him. Good shooting, he said. Told you I don't miss. You missed once. I'm injured. Despite everything, despite the blood and the bullets and the certain death advancing toward them, Marcus felt his lips twitch. Fair point. The attack broke off as quickly as it had begun. The remaining mercenaries melted back into the trees, carrying their wounded. In the sudden silence, only the wind's howl and Lily's crying remained. Marcus checked his ammunition. Half gone. He'd killed 4, Sarah had killed 2, But there were still at least 6 more out there, probably more in reserve. They'd survived the first wave. He doubted the second would be so easy. Viper watched through binoculars as his men retreated. 6 dead or wounded in less than 5 minutes. One man had held off 12 trained operatives like they were children playing at war. Recommendations. Ghost stood at his shoulder, her voice carefully neutral. We wait for the storm to break. Use the drones for better positioning. Hit them at dawn with coordinated assault. And if they try to move during the night, they won't. The pilot's injured. They have an infant. They're not going anywhere. Viper lowered the binoculars. Besides, he's smart. He knows his best chance is holding that position. He'll stay. Ghost hesitated. Sir, the child. What about it? Is it strictly necessary? The pilot, the SEAL, they're legitimate targets. But a baby. Viper turned to look at her. His face was expressionless, but something in his eyes made Ghost take an involuntary step back. You're questioning the mission. I'm questioning the parameters. Don't. He turned back to the forest to the cabin, barely visible through the snow. The contract is specific. No witnesses, no survivors. That includes the infant. She won't remember anything. She's 7 months old. She's leverage. Her parents are the real targets. If she lives, the Chens will never stop fighting, never stop talking. The people who hired us can't afford that. Viper's voice hardened. And neither can we. Ghost said nothing, but in the darkness where Viper couldn't see her hand drifted toward her sidearm. She thought about her sister's daughter, the niece she'd never met because she'd been deployed when the little girl was born, and then killed in a gang shooting before Ghost made it home. She thought about the crying she could hear even from here. Faint, terrified, innocent. She thought about the man inside that cabin fighting against impossible odds to protect a child who wasn't his. And she made a decision. Dawn brought a break in the storm. Marcus stood at the window watching the sky lighten from black to gray. The snow had stopped, at least for now. Visibility was improving. That was bad for them. The mercenaries could use their drones coordinate their movements attack with precision instead of chaos. How bad is it? Sarah's voice came from behind him. They'll hit us again within the hour. This time they'll be smarter. Then we need to be smarter too. Marcus turned. Sarah had pulled herself upright against the wall, Lily in her arms. The baby had finally stopped crying, exhausted into sleep. But Sarah's face was gray, her eyes hollow. She was running on nothing but will. You need to rest, he said. I need to help. She met his gaze without flinching. You can't do this alone, Lieutenant. You're good, probably the best I've ever seen, but you're not superhuman. Sooner or later they'll overwhelm you. Then we go out fighting. Or, Sarah hesitated, or we give them what they want. Marcus went very still. Explain. Not Lily. Never Lily. But me. Sarah's voice cracked, but she pushed through. I'm the one who knows the full story. I'm the witness. If I surrender offer to give them everything I know in exchange for Lily's life, they'll kill you both. Maybe, but maybe they'll take the deal. Maybe. They're not going to bargain. Marcus crossed to her, kneeling so they were eye to eye. These aren't criminals looking for an easy score. They're professionals. Their orders are to leave no survivors. That means you, that means Lily, that means me. The only way any of us lives is if we fight. Sarah stared at him. Tears were running down her face, though she didn't seem to notice. I'm scared. Good. Fear keeps you alive. You're not scared?" Marcus thought about it. About the child soldier in Syria, about the friends he'd buried, about all the times he should have died and hadn't. "No," he admitted. "I probably should be. But I stopped being scared a long time ago. Now I just do what needs to be done." Sarah reached out with her free hand and touched his face. Her fingers were cold, trembling. "Promise me something." "What?" "If it comes down to a choice, me or Lily, you choose her. You get her out, no matter what happens to me." Marcus looked at the baby sleeping in Sarah's arms, at the woman who was prepared to die for a child she'd never met before yesterday. "I promise." Outside, the sound of rotors began to fill the air. The drones were launching. The final assault was beginning. And somewhere in Marcus's chest, in a place he'd thought was dead forever, something stirred back to life. Not fear, hope. The first drone appeared over the tree line like a mechanical vulture. Marcus tracked it through his scope, calculating distance, wind speed, the angle he'd need to bring it down. But he held his fire. One drone meant nothing. The real danger was what came behind it. "They're mapping our positions," Sarah said from her spot beneath the east window. Her voice was stronger now, fed by adrenaline and desperation. "Standard reconnaissance pattern. They'll have a complete thermal image within minutes." "I know. So what do we do?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He was watching the trees, counting the shadows that moved between them. More than before. They'd brought reinforcements. "We make them pay for every inch." Titan pressed against his leg, the dog's body vibrating with barely contained aggression. The Belgian Malinois understood what was coming. 4 years of combat had taught him to read the rhythm of battle, and this rhythm was building toward something terrible. "Marcus," Sarah's voice cracked. "There's movement at the east. A lot of movement." He crossed to her window in 3 strides. She was right. At least 5 figures were advancing through the snow, using the broken terrain for cover. Professional movement. Coordinated spacing. This wasn't a probe. This was the main assault. "They're hitting us from both sides," Marcus said. "Classic pincer. Divide our fire, overwhelm our position." "Can we hold—" He looked at her. At the pistol in her shaking hands. At Lily sleeping in the makeshift nest beside her, oblivious to the death closing in. "We're going to find out." The first shots came from the north. Controlled bursts, professional suppression fire, designed to keep Marcus's head down while the assault teams moved into position. He answered with precise single shots, conserving ammunition, making every round count. A man screamed in the trees. 1 down. Return fire intensified. Bullets punched through the cabin walls, showering Marcus with splinters. He rolled left, came up firing, dropped another shadow. "East window!" Sarah's shout cut through the chaos. "They're rushing." Marcus spun and saw them 3 men sprinting toward the cabin, using the covering fire to close the distance. Sarah was already shooting her rounds, going wide in her panic. "Aim lower! Lead them!" She adjusted. Her next shot caught the lead man in the chest. He went down hard, but the other 2 kept coming. Marcus couldn't reach them in time. They were going to breach the east wall. Titan attack. The command was barely out of his mouth before the dog was moving. Titan hit the first attacker like a guided missile, 70 pounds of muscle and fury launching through the broken window. The man's scream was cut short as powerful jaws closed on his throat. The second attacker tried to swing his rifle toward the dog. Marcus shot him through the window. "Titan, return!" The dog released his prey and bounded back through the window. Blood matting his muzzle. He immediately positioned himself in front of Lily, a living shield of fur and teeth. "Good boy," Marcus breathed. "Good boy." But there was no time for praise. The northern assault was intensifying. More men emerging from the trees. More bullets tearing through the cabin. Sarah was reloading with shaking hands. "How many did we get? 5, maybe 6. There's still—" The grenade came through the north window. Marcus saw it in slow motion, the dark cylinder spinning through the air, trailing smoke. Fragmentation grenade. 3-second fuse, lethal radius of 15 meters. He didn't think. He moved. His hand closed around the grenade, and he threw it back through the window in one fluid motion. It exploded in midair close enough to send him staggering close enough to pepper his arm with shrapnel. "Marcus, I'm fine." He wasn't fine. Blood was running down his arm, mixing with the earlier dog bite. His ears were ringing, but he could still fight. "Stay down. They're going to rush us." They did. 6 men came through the smoke, abandoning cover, betting everything on overwhelming force. Marcus dropped 2 before they reached the cabin. A third made it through the door. Close quarters. No room for rifles. Marcus let his weapon fall and met the man with his hands. The attacker was big, well-trained, fast. But Marcus had been fighting in hell for 15 years. He knew techniques that weren't in any manual. The fight lasted 4 seconds. It ended with the attacker's neck at an impossible angle. The 4th man came through the window behind him. Sarah shot him twice in the back. The 5th tripped one of Marcus's wire traps and went down screaming, his ankle shattered by the improvised snare. The 6th turned and ran. Silence fell over the cabin, broken only by labored breathing and Lily's renewed crying. Marcus stood in the middle of the carnage chest, heaving blood dripping from both arms. Bodies lay around him. The air stank of cordite and copper. "Is it over?" Sarah whispered. "No." He limped to the window, scanning the tree line. That was the first wave. "They're regrouping." "How many are left?" Marcus counted the bodies. 8 down, including the ones from last night. The team had started with at least 12, but he'd seen more shadows in the trees this morning. "Too many." Sarah closed her eyes. When she opened them, tears were streaming down her face, but her voice was steady. "Then we keep fighting." "Yes." Marcus crossed to her, knelt beside her. His blood dripped onto the floor between them. "We keep fighting until we can't fight anymore." And then, he didn't answer. They both knew what would happen then. Titan whined and pressed closer to Lily. The baby's crying had subsided to hiccups, her tiny fist wrapped around a fold of the dog's fur. Even now, even in the middle of slaughter, the child trusted the animal protecting her. Marcus watched them for a moment. Something shifted in his chest. Something that felt like breaking and healing at the same time. "I'm going to get her out of here," he said quietly. "I don't know how yet, but I'm going to find a way." Sarah reached out and touched his face. Her fingers left a smear of blood on his cheek, but neither of them noticed. "I believe you." The radio crackled. Marcus froze. The radio had been dead since Sarah's desperate transmission yesterday. No signal, no response, nothing but static. But now a voice was cutting through, faint, broken, but unmistakably human. "Any station. This is FBI HRT, responding to emergency beacon. Please confirm your position." Sarah grabbed the radio before Marcus could move. "This is Special Agent Sarah Brennan. We're under attack. Multiple hostiles, civilian infant at risk requesting immediate extraction. Static. Then, Agent Brennan, we have your signal. ETA approximately minutes. Can you hold your position?" The transmission cut out before they could hear the time. Marcus met Sarah's eyes. Hope and terror warred in her expression. "They're coming," she breathed. "Help is coming. If we can survive long enough." A new sound cut through the morning air. Not gunfire, not drones. An engine. Heavy. Getting closer. Marcus looked out the window and felt his stomach drop. A snowmobile was approaching from the north, moving fast. On it sat a figure in winter camouflage, and mounted on the vehicle's frame was something that made the previous attacks look like warm-up exercises. A belt-fed machine gun. "Get down!" Marcus threw himself toward Sarah and Lily as the first burst tore through the cabin wall. The heavy rounds punched through wood like paper, spraying debris everywhere. The bench where Sarah had been lying moments ago exploded into splinters. Marcus covered them with his body, shielding them from the destruction raining down. Titan pressed against them, adding his mass to the protective huddle. The firing stopped. The engine's roar grew louder. "He's circling," Marcus said. "Coming around for another pass." "What do we do?" Marcus looked at the cabin walls, already riddled with holes. The structure wouldn't survive another assault like that. They needed to move. But Sarah couldn't walk, and Lily couldn't be exposed to the gunfire. "Stay here," he said. "Keep low, keep Lily covered." "Where are you going?" Marcus grabbed his rifle and headed for the door. "To end this." Marcus. He didn't look back. Couldn't look back. If he saw the fear in her eyes, the trust, the desperate hope, he might hesitate. And hesitation would get them all killed. He burst through the door into the cold morning air. The snowmobile was completing its circle, coming around for another pass. The gunner was already swiveling the weapon toward the cabin. Marcus ran straight at him. It was suicide. Every tactical instinct screamed that he was throwing his life away. But the gunner wasn't expecting a frontal assault. He was expecting his targets to cower, to hide, to die in the false safety of their shelter. Marcus Cole had never cowered in his life. He fired as he ran, not aiming to kill, but to disrupt. His rounds sparked off the snowmobile's frame, forcing the gunner to duck. The machine gun's arc swung wide bullets, chewing up snow 10 feet to Marcus's left. 30 yards. 20. 10. Marcus leaped. He hit the gunner full force, both of them tumbling off the snowmobile as it continued forward, driverless. They crashed into the snow in a tangle of limbs and weapons. The gunner was strong, well-trained. He landed an elbow to Marcus's temple that set stars exploding behind his eyes. Marcus answered with a headbutt that crushed the man's nose. They rolled through the snow, each fighting for advantage. The gunner found a knife somewhere, slashed at Marcus's face. Marcus caught his wrist, twisted, heard bone snap. The man screamed. Marcus silenced him with a blow that ended the fight. He lay in the snow for a moment, gasping, bleeding from a dozen wounds. His head throbbed. His arms felt like lead. Every breath sent pain shooting through his ribs. But he was alive. And the machine gun was silent. He forced himself to his feet, retrieved his rifle, and staggered back toward the cabin. Sarah was at the window, her face white with terror. "I thought you were dead," she said when he pushed through the door. "I saw you run at him, and I thought, not dead yet." He collapsed against the wall, leaving a bloody smear on the wood. "How's Lily?" "Scared, unharmed." Sarah's voice broke. "You're insane. You know that, right? Completely, certifiably insane." "You mentioned that before. And you're still not listening." Marcus almost laughed. Almost. "Old habits." Titan padded over and pressed his nose against Marcus's hand. The dog's amber eyes were worried, assessing. Marcus scratched behind his ears with bloody fingers. "I'm okay, boy. Just need a minute." But they didn't have a minute. Even as Marcus sat there trying to gather his strength, he could hear movement in the trees. The mercenaries were regrouping, assessing their losses, planning their next move. And somewhere out there, Viper was watching. The leader hadn't shown himself yet, hadn't committed to the assault. He was waiting, Marcus realized, letting his men wear down the defenders' probe for weaknesses. When Viper finally moved, it would be to finish things. "The radio," Marcus said. "Try them again." Sarah grabbed the unit, but before she could transmit, a voice crackled through. Not FBI. "Very impressive, Lieutenant Cole." Marcus went rigid. They knew his name. They knew who he was. "My employers underestimated you," the voice continued. Calm, professional, almost admiring. "I won't make the same mistake." Marcus keyed the radio. "You've lost half your team. Pull back now and you walk away. Keep pushing and I bury the rest of you." A pause, then a dry chuckle. "Bold words from a man bleeding out in a cabin with an injured woman and an infant, but I appreciate the theater." The voice hardened. "Here's my counteroffer. Send out the pilot and the child. You can walk away. Go back to whatever black ops hole you crawled out of. Pretend this never happened. And if I refuse, then I stop trying to preserve my team and start trying to end this quickly. I have incendiary rounds, Lieutenant. That cabin will burn beautifully, and I have a sniper with a clear shot at your position. The only reason you're still alive is because I've been giving you chances you don't deserve." Marcus looked at Sarah, at Lily in her arms, at Titan standing guard between them and the door. "No deal. Think carefully. This is your last chance." I said no. "You want them, you come through me. And I promise you the price will be more than you want to pay." Silence on the radio. Then, "So be it." The sniper's bullet came through the window half a second later. It caught Marcus in the shoulder, spinning him around, slamming him against the wall. Pain exploded through his body, white-hot, overwhelming the kind of pain that shut down thought and left only animal survival. He heard Sarah screaming, heard Titan barking, heard Lily crying. And through it all he heard his own voice, hoarse and desperate. "Stay down, everyone, stay down!" Another shot punched through the wall, inches from his head. Then another. The sniper was walking his fire through the cabin, methodically searching for targets. Marcus forced himself to move, to crawl, to put his body between the bullets and the people he'd sworn to protect. Blood poured from his shoulder. His vision was graying at the edges, but he could still hear the voices on the radio. The mercenaries coordinating their final assault. Viper giving orders with cold precision. And beneath it all, another sound. Distant but growing. Rotors. Not drones. Helicopters. Multiple helicopters coming fast from the south. The FBI was almost here. They just had to survive a few more minutes. Marcus looked at Sarah. Her face was wet with tears, but her hands were steady on her pistol. She understood. "Hold the line," he gasped. "Just hold the line." Outside, the mercenaries were moving. Marcus could hear them advancing, abandoning caution, now rushing to finish the job before rescue arrived. Titan's growl filled the cabin. The dog positioned himself at the door, muscles coiled ready to charge into the teeth of hell itself. And somewhere in the chaos, through the pain and the blood and the thunder of approaching helicopters, Marcus Cole made peace with dying. He'd spent 15 years fighting other people's wars, killing when ordered, surviving when survival seemed impossible. But this protecting an innocent child, standing between evil and the helpless, this was what he'd been training for all along. If this was his last fight, it was the right one. He raised his rifle with his one good arm. "Come on then," he whispered to the shadows outside. "Let's finish this." The door exploded inward. Titan hit the first man through the door before Marcus could pull the trigger. The Belgian Malinois launched himself like a missile, 70 pounds of trained fury slamming into the mercenary's chest. They went down together, the man's rifle discharging wildly into the ceiling. Titan's jaws found his throat and ended the fight in seconds. The second attacker tried to step over his fallen comrade. Marcus shot him twice. The third hesitated at the threshold, caught between advancing and retreating. That hesitation cost him his life. "Titan, return!" Marcus's voice was raw, torn from a throat tight with pain. The dog released his prey and bounded back, positioning himself in front of Lily without being told. Sarah was firing now, her pistol barking steadily at shadows in the doorway. Her aim had improved since last night. Fear and desperation had burned away her uncertainty. "How many rounds?" Marcus called. 4, maybe 5. Not enough. Not nearly enough. A grenade bounced through the shattered door. Marcus saw it rolling across the floor toward Sarah and Lily. Time compressed. His wounded shoulder screamed as he lunged, scooping the grenade and hurling it back through the doorway in one agonizing motion. The explosion rocked the cabin. Screams erupted outside, but Marcus barely heard them. He'd landed hard on his injured shoulder, and the pain was a white-hot supernova, consuming everything else. "Marcus." Sarah's hand found his face. "Marcus, stay with me." "I'm here." He forced the words through gritted teeth. "Still here." But he wasn't sure how much longer that would be true. Blood was pooling beneath him now, spreading across the wooden floor. His shoulder wound had torn open further. His vision kept fading in and out. "The helicopters!" he gasped. "How close?" Sarah listened. Through the gunfire and chaos, through her own ragged breathing, and Lily's terrified cries, she strained to hear. "Closer, much closer, maybe 2 minutes." 2 minutes. An eternity in combat. Men could die 100 times in 2 minutes. "Then we hold for 2 minutes." He tried to rise. His arm buckled. Sarah caught him, held him upright against the wall. "You can't fight like this." "Watch me." The sniper's bullet came through the wall 6 inches from his head. Then another. Then a third. The shooter was getting the range, walking his fire toward them with methodical precision. "Move!" Marcus shoved Sarah toward the corner, the only angle that might offer protection. She scrambled, dragging Lily with her Titan following close behind. Another bullet. Closer. Marcus stayed where he was, making himself a target. If the sniper was focused on him, he wasn't shooting at Sarah and Lily. "What are you doing?" Sarah screamed. "Buying time!" The next bullet grazed his ear. He felt the heat of it passing, felt blood run down his neck. But he didn't move. "Come on," he thought. "Focus on me. Just a little longer." Outside, the helicopter sounds were building. Rotors beating the air like war drums. Close now. So close. And then a new voice cut through the chaos. Not from outside, from the radio on the floor. "All units, this is Ghost. Primary target is in the northeast corner. Repeat, northeast corner. Adjust fire." Marcus's blood went cold. Ghost. Viper's second in command. She was directing fire straight at Sarah and Lily's position. He looked at Sarah, saw her face go white as she understood. "She's telling them where we are," Sarah whispered. "She's—" The wall behind her exploded. Bullets tore through the wooden planks, spraying splinters everywhere. Sarah threw herself over Lily, covering the baby with her body. Titan pressed against them both, adding his mass to the shield. Marcus raised his rifle with his one good arm and fired blindly through the hole in the wall. He heard a grunt, a curse. Someone fell, but more bullets came. Always more. "Marcus, I'm hit." Sarah's voice was strange, distant. "My side. No, not her, not now." He crawled toward her, every inch an agony. Blood dripped from his shoulder, his ear a dozen smaller wounds. When he reached her, he could see the dark stain spreading across her ribs. "Let me see." "It's bad." Her voice was steady, but her eyes were glassy. Shock setting in. "Take Lily. Take her and run. I'm not leaving you." "Marcus, I said no." He pressed his hand against her wound, felt the hot blood welling between his fingers. "I didn't carry you this far to leave you now." The radio crackled again. Ghost's voice. "All units hold fire. Primary target eliminated. I say again, primary target, liar." Marcus grabbed the radio with his bloody hand. "Nice try. We're still breathing." Silence. Then, "Lieutenant Cole, you're more resilient than I expected. Your boss keeps saying that. Tell him to come find out for himself." A pause. When Ghost spoke again, her voice had changed. Softer. Almost human. "For what it's worth, I didn't want this. The child, save it." Marcus's voice was ice. "You made your choice. Now live with it." He threw the radio against the wall. It shattered. "Why did you do that?" Sarah gasped. Because the next thing she was going to say was a location update. She was tracking our movements through our own transmissions. The helicopters were loud now. So loud the cabin walls vibrated. Marcus could see lights sweeping through the trees outside, searchlights cutting through the morning gray. 30 seconds. Maybe less. A shadow appeared in the doorway. Not a soldier. Not a faceless mercenary in winter gear. A man. Tall, lean, moving with the controlled grace of someone who had killed many times and would kill many more. His face was weathered, his eyes empty of anything resembling humanity. Viper had come to finish the job himself. "Lieutenant Cole." He stepped into the cabin, a pistol held loosely at his side. "I must admit I'm impressed. You've cost me 11 men. 11. Should have brought more." Viper smiled. It was the coldest expression Marcus had ever seen. "I considered it, but I wanted to see for myself what one man could do against impossible odds." He glanced at Sarah, at Lily, at Titan, growling low in the corner. "Now I know. The FBI is here." Marcus's rifle was empty. His pistol was somewhere on the floor, lost in the chaos. He had nothing left but his voice and his will. "In 30 seconds, this cabin will be surrounded. You can't win." "Perhaps not." Viper raised his weapon. "But I can finish what I started." The pistol aimed at Lily. Marcus moved. He didn't think, didn't calculate, didn't consider the pain, or the blood loss, or the certainty of death. He simply threw himself forward, putting his body between the gun and the baby. Viper fired. The bullet hit Marcus in the chest. He felt it punch through, felt the hot impact, felt something vital tear inside him. But his momentum carried him forward, crashing into Viper, driving them both to the ground. The pistol flew from Viper's hand. They grappled on the bloody floor, two wounded animals fighting with the last of their strength. Marcus couldn't breathe, couldn't see clearly, but he could still fight. His hands found Viper's throat. Viper's fingers clawed at his face, his wound anything to break the grip. Marcus held on, squeezed, felt cartilage beginning to give way. "Titan!" Sarah's voice distant and desperate. "Titan, attack!" The dog launched himself across the room. 70 pounds of Belgian Malinois hit Viper from the side jaws, closing on the arm that was reaching for a hidden knife. Viper screamed. The grip on Marcus loosened. But so did Marcus's grip on consciousness. The world was fading, sounds becoming distant, colors bleeding to gray. He heard Sarah calling his name, heard Lily crying, heard Titan's growls and Viper's screams and the thunder of helicopters directly overhead. And then voices. New voices. Shouting commands he couldn't understand. "FBI federal agents, drop your weapons." Light flooded the cabin. Figures in tactical gear poured through the door. Someone was pulling Titan off Viper. Someone else was kneeling over Marcus, pressing something against his chest. "We've got multiple casualties. I need medics now. The baby. Check the baby. She's okay. Minor exposure, but she's okay." Marcus tried to speak. Tried to tell them about Sarah, about her wound, about how she'd fought beside him like a warrior. But his mouth would not work anymore. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him was Titan's face. The dog had broken free from the agents holding him and was standing over Marcus, whining, licking his face. "Good boy," Marcus whispered. Or maybe he only thought it. Then there was nothing. Sarah watched them load Marcus onto the stretcher, watched the medics work on him with desperate efficiency, shouting medical terms she didn't understand. "Is he alive?" She tried to sit up, but hands pressed her back down. "Tell me he's alive." "He's critical, ma'am. Multiple gunshot wounds, significant blood loss." The paramedic's face was grim. "We're doing everything we can." They loaded her onto a stretcher next. Her wound was bad, but not as bad as Marcus's. She'd probably live. Probably. But what was the point if he didn't? She'd known him less than 24 hours. A stranger who had stumbled into her disaster and chosen to stay. Who had bled for a child he'd never met. Who had thrown himself in front of a bullet meant for a baby girl. Men like that weren't supposed to exist. Not in the real world. Not outside of stories. But he did exist. And he was dying. "Lily," Sarah gasped. "Where's Lily?" "The infant is safe, ma'am. She's being transported to the hospital for evaluation, but she appears unharmed." Safe. Lily was safe. The mission was accomplished. The baby would live. Her parents would get her back. So why did Sarah feel like she was dying too? They carried her past Viper's body. The mercenary leader was alive, barely. His throat crushed, his arm torn to shreds. Agents were handcuffing him anyway, taking no chances. "He'll face trial," one of the agents said. "He'll answer for what he did." Sarah didn't care. Trials were for later. Justice was for later. Right now, all she could think about was the man who had saved them all. "Where's the dog?" she asked suddenly. "Where's Titan? The K9? The agent looked confused. "He's being secured. He attacked several of our people when they tried to approach Lieutenant Cole. He thought they were threats. He was protecting Marcus." Sarah's voice cracked. "Please, let him stay with Marcus. He needs— Ma'am, I can't— Please." Tears were streaming down her face now. "They saved us. Both of them. The least you can do is keep them together." The agent hesitated. Then he nodded slowly. "I'll see what I can do." They loaded Sarah into the helicopter. Through the window she could see them working on Marcus in the adjacent aircraft. His face was pale, almost gray. Blood everywhere. But Titan was there. Someone had let the dog into the helicopter, and he was lying beside Marcus's stretcher, his head resting on the unconscious man's arm, guarding him. Even now. Sarah closed her eyes and let the tears come. In Washington, D.C., Alan Frost was watching the news when the FBI agents arrived at his office. He'd been expecting them, had known from the moment he heard about the rescue that his time was running out. The mercenaries had failed. The witnesses had survived. And someone would inevitably trace the leak back to its source. Still, when the door opened and he saw the badges, something inside him collapsed. "Deputy Director Frost." The lead agent's voice was cold. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder treason and endangering a federal witness. I want a lawyer." "You'll get one. But first you're going to answer some questions." The agent stepped closer, his eyes hard. A lot of good people almost died tonight because of you. A baby almost died. So you're going to tell us everything, and maybe if you're very lucky, you'll spend the rest of your life in a cell instead of in the ground." Alan didn't resist as they cuffed him. Didn't try to explain or justify or beg. There was nothing left to say. He'd made his choice the moment he'd leaked that flight path. Everything since then had been inevitable. As they led him out of his office past the colleagues who stared with shock and disgust, Alan Frost thought about the baby girl he'd almost killed. He hoped she would never learn his name. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells. Sarah had surgery to repair the damage to her ribs. The bullet had missed her vital organs by inches. Lucky, the doctors said. Incredibly lucky. She didn't feel lucky. She felt empty. For 3 days, Marcus didn't wake up. 3 days of surgeries and transfusions and hushed conversations outside his door. 3 days of Sarah refusing to leave the hospital, refusing to rest, refusing to do anything but wait. Titan waited too. The hospital had tried to remove him. Regulations, they said. Health codes. But the dog had growled at anyone who came near Marcus's room, and eventually they'd given up. Someone brought a bed for him and food, and he lay there like a sphinx guarding a tomb. On the 4th day, Marcus opened his eyes. Sarah was there. She'd been reading to him not because she thought he could hear, but because the silence was unbearable. When she saw his eyes flutter open, the book fell from her hands. "Marcus." He blinked. Once, twice. His gaze found her face, and something like recognition flickered in his eyes. "Sarah." His voice was a rasp, barely audible. "Lily, she's safe. She's with her parents." Tears were running down Sarah's face again. She seemed to do a lot of crying now. "You saved her. You saved both of us." Marcus's eyes moved to the dog lying beside his bed. Titan's tail thumped against the floor. "Hey, boy." Marcus's hand moved just slightly, and Titan pressed his nose against it. "Good boy. You did good." The dog whined and licked his fingers. "The doctors say you're going to make it," Sarah said. "It's going to be a long recovery, but you're going to live." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, Viper, in custody. He'll face trial for terrorism, murder, attempted murder. They've already flipped half his surviving team. Sarah's voice hardened. And Alan Frost, the FBI deputy director who leaked the flight path. They arrested him the same night. He's cooperating. Good. Marcus's eyes closed. Good. Sarah thought he'd fallen asleep again. But then he spoke so quietly, she had to lean in to hear. "When I ran at that machine gun, I thought I was going to die. You almost did. I know." He opened his eyes again, met her gaze. "But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. Because I knew why I was fighting. Not for orders. Not for duty. For her. For you." Sarah took his hand, held it tight. "I thought you said you stopped being scared a long time ago." "I did. But there's a difference between not being scared and not caring." He paused, gathering strength. "I think I started caring again. Somewhere in that cabin. Somewhere between the first bullet and the last." Sarah didn't know what to say. So she just held his hand and let the tears fall. They stayed that way for a long time. Outside the window, the sun was rising. A new day, a new beginning. And somewhere in a federal nursery, a 7-month-old baby named Lily was being held by parents who had never stopped praying for her return. 2 weeks after the siege, Marcus took his first steps without assistance. It hurt like hell. Every muscle screamed. Every nerve burned. The physical therapist kept telling him to slow down, to rest, to let his body heal at its own pace. Marcus ignored her. "You're going to tear your stitches," Sarah said from the doorway. She was on crutches now, her own leg healing slowly but surely. "The doctor said 6 weeks minimum before weight-bearing exercise." "Doctors say a lot of things. And you ignore all of them." "Old habit." Marcus gritted his teeth and took another step. Titan walked beside him, pressed close, ready to catch him if he fell. The dog hadn't left his side since the hospital allowed him into the room permanently. "How's Lily?" Sarah's face softened. "Good. Her parents brought her by this morning while you were in physical therapy. She's gained weight, sleeping through the night now." "That's good. They want to meet you. James and Michelle. They've asked every day since you woke up." Marcus stopped walking. His jaw tightened. "Not yet." "Marcus, I said not yet." He resumed his painful shuffle across the room. "I'm not ready for gratitude. Not from them." Sarah watched him struggle. She'd learned over the past 2 weeks that pushing Marcus Cole was pointless. The man had walls built from titanium and trauma, and they only came down when he decided to lower them. But she was patient and stubborn, and she'd seen behind those walls just for a moment in that cabin when he'd promised to get Lily out or die trying. "The FBI called again," she said, changing the subject. "They want your statement about Ghost." Marcus's expression darkened. "What about her?" "She's talking, cooperating. Claims she was trying to help us at the end, feeding false information to the other mercenaries." Sarah hesitated. "She's asking for immunity in exchange for testimony against the money people behind the attack. And you believe her? I don't know what I believe." Sarah moved into the room, her crutches clicking on the linoleum. "But she gave them names, big names, people connected to the bioterrorism plot that Lily's parents uncovered. If she's telling the truth, her information could prevent attacks that would kill thousands." Marcus reached the window and stood there, staring out at nothing. His reflection looked back at him, gaunt and pale and older than his 38 years. "She helped them track us, gave them our position, almost got you and Lily killed." "I know. And now she wants forgiveness. She wants to survive, same as everyone." Sarah joined him at the window. "I'm not saying she deserves immunity. I'm saying it's not our call to make." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, "She had a moment, in the cabin. I heard it in her voice when she was on the radio. Something human, something that didn't want to kill a baby. But she didn't stop them. No, she didn't." His hand found Titan's head fingers buried in the dog's fur. "Sometimes the moment passes. Sometimes you choose wrong, and you have to live with it forever." Sarah heard something in his voice, something that went deeper than Ghost or Viper or anything that had happened in the mountains. "Syria," she said softly. Marcus flinched, just slightly, but she saw it. "The review board files were in my briefing packet," Sarah continued. "After the rescue, the FBI gave me everything, including your service record. Then you know. I know you disobeyed orders to save a child. I know 3 of your teammates died in the extraction," and she touched his arm. "I know the review board called you reckless." They were right. Were they? Sarah moved to face him, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Because from where I'm standing, you did the same thing in that cabin. You disobeyed every protocol, every rule, every instinct that told you to wait for backup. And because of that, Lily is alive." Marcus's jaw worked. "That's different." "How?" "Because this time the only person I got hurt was myself." The words hung in the air between them. Sarah saw it then, the guilt he carried like a second skin. The faces of the men who had died because of his choice. The weight of lives that could never be restored. "Marcus?" Her voice was gentle. You saved a child. In Syria and here. Whatever else happened that matters. Tell that to their families. I will if you let me. She took his hand. And I'll tell them that the man who made that choice spent the rest of his life trying to be worthy of it. That he threw himself in front of bullets for strangers. That he nearly died protecting a baby he'd never met. Her grip tightened. That's not recklessness, Marcus. That's grace. He looked at her. Really looked the way he had in the cabin when she'd asked him to promise to save Lily first. I don't know how to be anything else, he said quietly. I've tried. After Syria, I tried to follow the rules. To wait for orders. To be the soldier they wanted me to be. He shook his head. I couldn't do it. When I hear someone in trouble, something takes over. Something I can't control. Then stop trying to control it. Sarah stepped closer. Stop punishing yourself for being the person you are. The person who runs toward danger instead of away from it. The person who sees a child in need and doesn't calculate the odds. And what about the people who die because of me? They made their own choices. Your teammates in Syria knew the risks. They followed you because they believed in what you were doing. She cupped his face in her hands. Honor them by living. By continuing to be the man they died for. Marcus closed his eyes. A single tear escaped, tracking down his weathered cheek. It was the first time Sarah had seen him cry. Titan whined and pressed closer, sensing his partner's pain. Marcus dropped one hand to the dog's head, drawing strength from the familiar warmth. I don't know how to do this, he whispered. Neither do I. Sarah smiled through her own tears. But maybe we can figure it out together. The trial began 6 weeks later. Viper, whose real name turned out to be Viktor Kozlov, was charged with 16 counts of murder, 3 counts of attempted murder-terrorism conspiracy, and enough weapons violations to fill a phone book. His surviving team members were being tried separately, each one cutting deals to testify against the others. Alan Frost pleaded guilty to all charges. His lawyer had advised him to fight, but Alan refused. He wanted it over. Wanted to stop pretending he was anything other than what he'd become. The day he was sentenced, he asked to make a statement. The judge allowed it. I told myself I was a good man making hard choices. Alan said, his voice empty. I told myself one life didn't matter against the greater good. I told myself the child was acceptable collateral. He paused. The courtroom was silent. I was wrong. About everything. And I'll spend whatever years I have left knowing that a baby almost died because I was too much of a coward to face my own debts. He looked directly at James and Michelle Chen, sitting in the front row with Lily in their arms. I don't ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just want you to know that I see what I did. I see it clearly. And I'll see it every day until I die. The judge sentenced him to life without parole. Marcus watched from the back of the courtroom. He'd been asked to testify, but his role in the events was classified. The official story was that a military asset had been conducting unrelated operations in the area and responded to a distress signal. No names. No details. That was fine with Marcus. He didn't want recognition. Didn't want medals or commendations or newspaper stories about the hero SEAL who saved a baby in a blizzard. He just wanted to heal. And maybe for the first time in his life, to rest. Sarah found him in the hallway after the sentencing. It's over, she said. Is it? Frost is going to prison forever. Viper's trial starts next month and Ghost's testimony will bury him. The bioterrorism cell has been dismantled. Lily is safe. She touched his arm. What more do you need? Marcus looked at her. at the woman who had fought beside him, bled beside him, refused to give up even when giving up was the only sane option. "I need to meet them," he said. Sarah blinked. "The Chens." "I've been avoiding it, hiding behind recovery and classified operations and every excuse I could find." He took a breath. "But you were right. I need to stop running from the good things too." They found James and Michelle in the courthouse lobby, surrounded by FBI agents and lawyers. Lily was asleep in her mother's arms, oblivious to the chaos around her. Michelle saw them first. Her eyes went wide, then filled with tears. "Lieutenant Cole." The agents parted to let them through. Marcus stepped forward, suddenly uncertain. "What did you say to people whose child you'd killed for?" What words could possibly be enough? James solved the problem by pulling him into a hug. It was unexpected, overwhelming. Marcus stood rigid for a moment, unsure how to respond. Then slowly his arms came up. "Thank you." James's voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you for our daughter. Thank you for everything you risked. I just did what anyone would do." "No." Michelle stepped forward. Lily cradled against her chest. "You did what most people only dream of doing. You saw evil, and you fought it. You saw innocence, and you protected it." She reached out and took his hand. "That's not common. That's not ordinary. That's grace." There was that word again, the same word Sarah had used. Marcus looked at Lily. The baby was awake now, blinking up at him with curious blue eyes. She couldn't understand what had happened, couldn't know how close she'd come to never existing at all. But she reached for him anyway, tiny fingers stretching toward his face. Marcus hesitated. Then carefully he took her hand. Lily's grip closed around his finger. She smiled. Something cracked inside Marcus's chest. Something that had been frozen since Syria, maybe longer. He felt it give way, felt the ice melt, felt warmth spread through places he'd thought were dead forever. "She knows," Michelle whispered. "She knows who you are." Marcus couldn't speak, could barely breathe. This tiny person, this life he'd almost died to save, was holding his hand like he was the most important person in the world. He thought about the child soldier in Syria, about the faces of the men who'd died getting him out, about all the years of guilt and self-punishment, and walls built so high he couldn't see over them. And he thought about what Sarah had said, about honoring the dead by living, about continuing to be the man they'd died for. "Thank you," he managed, "for letting me meet her. Thank you for giving her back to us." James's hand rested on his shoulder. "Whatever you need, whatever we can do for the rest of our lives, we're here. You're family now, Lieutenant, whether you like it or not." Family. The word hit Marcus like a physical blow. He hadn't had family since he was 18, hadn't let himself want one. But looking at Lily's smile, at the tears on Michelle's face, at the fierce gratitude in James's eyes, he realized something. He wasn't alone anymore. Maybe he never had to be again. That night, Marcus sat in the hospital garden with Titan. His discharge papers had finally come through. Tomorrow, he would leave this place, return to a world that had continued spinning while he lay bleeding in a cabin and recovering in a hospital bed. But he didn't know what that world looked like anymore. His career with the SEALs was over. The injuries he'd sustained were too severe for active duty. The Navy had offered him a training position, a desk job, a way to stay connected without being in the field. He hadn't decided yet. Titan pressed against his leg, sensing his uncertainty. The dog had been cleared for retirement, too, his leg wound healed but permanent. They'd offered to place him with a new handler, continue his working life with someone younger, faster, whole. Marcus had refused. "We started this together," he'd told the review board. "We finish it together." They'd allowed it. A warrior and his dog, both broken, both healing, both facing an uncertain future. Footsteps on the path behind him. He didn't turn. "I thought I'd find you here." Sarah's voice was soft. "You always come to the garden when you're thinking too hard." "I'm not thinking. I'm avoiding thinking." She sat beside him on the bench. Her leg had healed enough that she could walk without crutches now, though she still moved carefully. "I got my orders today," she said. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. "And medical leave for another 3 months, then reassignment." She paused. "They want me at Quantico, teaching helicopter tactics to new agents." "That's a good posting. It's a desk job with occasional flight time." Sarah's voice was neutral, but Marcus heard the disappointment beneath it. "Not exactly what I signed up for." "You could go back to active duty, eventually." "Maybe." She turned to look at him. "Or maybe I don't want to anymore." Marcus met her gaze. "What do you want?" The question hung between them. Loaded, heavy with everything they hadn't said over the past weeks. "I want to stop running," Sarah said finally. "I've spent my whole career chasing danger because it was easier than building a life. Safer to risk dying than to risk loving." She took his hand. "Sound familiar?" Too familiar. Every word she said could have come from his own mouth. "I'm broken," Marcus said. "You know that." "So am I. I have nightmares, almost every night." "So do I. Now. I don't know how to be in a relationship. I've never—" Sarah kissed him. It was sudden, fierce, unexpected. Marcus froze for an instant, then his arms came around her, pulling her close. The kiss deepened, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Marcus Cole stopped thinking. When they finally broke apart, Sarah was smiling. "You were saying—" "I have no idea." "Good." She rested her forehead against his. "Because I'm tired of words. I'm tired of analyzing and planning and protecting myself from possibilities that might hurt. I almost died in that cabin, Marcus. We both did. And the only thing I could think about was that I'd never taken a chance on anything that mattered. And this matters. You tell me." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "Does this matter to you?" Marcus thought about his empty apartment, his empty life, the years of missions and medals and nothing that felt like home. Then he thought about Sarah's hand in his during those long hours in the cabin, about her voice keeping him anchored when the blood loss tried to drag him under, about the way she looked at him like he was more than his scars and his sins. "Yes," he said. "This matters." Titan's tail thumped against the ground. The dog seemed to approve. Sarah laughed a sound that reached places inside Marcus that had been silent for years. "I think that's his blessing," she said. "He's always been a good judge of character." And they sat together in the garden as the sun set, two broken people choosing to be broken together. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It wasn't a promise that everything would be perfect. But it was a start. And sometimes Marcus was learning a start was enough. 3 days later, Ghost testified. The courtroom was packed. Media from around the world had descended on the trial, hungry for details about the conspiracy that had nearly claimed a baby's life. Ghost, whose real name was Elena Vasquez, took the stand in an orange jumpsuit, her dark hair shorter than it had been on the mountain. She looked smaller somehow, less dangerous, but her eyes were the same. Hard, watchful, calculating even now. The prosecutor walked her through the events slowly, methodically. The planning, the attack, the pursuit through the blizzard. And when you realized the targets had survived the crash, the prosecutor said, "What was your response?" "I followed orders." Elena's voice was flat. "We tracked them to the ranger station. We engaged. But at some point your behavior changed. Can you describe that?" Elena was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted. Softer. Almost human. "There was a moment during the siege. We were preparing an incendiary assault on the cabin. One of our men had a grenade, was going to burn them out. And I could hear the baby crying. Through the storm, through the gunfire, I could hear her." Elena's jaw tightened. "I thought about my niece. She died when she was 3. Drive-by shooting. Wrong place, wrong time." The courtroom was utterly silent. "I shot the man with the grenade," Elena continued. "Stopped the assault. Viper saw me do it. What happened then? I ran. Viper would have killed me. I spent the rest of the night trying to stay alive in the blizzard." She met the prosecutor's eyes. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I helped plan an operation that killed people. I tracked a woman and a baby through a blizzard so men could murder them." "Then why are you testifying?" Elena looked out at the courtroom, at the faces watching her with hatred and curiosity and judgment. "Because I had one moment where I chose different. One moment where I was something other than what they made me." Her voice cracked, just slightly. "That moment doesn't erase what I did. But maybe it means something. Maybe it means I can still help stop the people who wanted that baby dead." The testimony continued for hours. Names, dates, financial records. The inner workings of a conspiracy that reached into corporations, governments, terrorist cells across 3 continents. By the time Elena stepped down, the prosecution had enough to bring charges against 17 additional suspects. Marcus watched from the back of the courtroom. He'd come to see for himself, to put a face to the voice that had haunted his nightmares. He'd expected to feel hatred, rage, the burning need for vengeance that had driven him through so many battles. Instead, he felt something closer to pity. Elena Vasquez had made choices that led to death and suffering. She would pay for those choices, immunity deal or not. But she'd also had one moment, one instant, where humanity had broken through the training and the orders and the careful numbness. That moment had saved Lily's life. Marcus didn't forgive her, couldn't forgive her. But he understood perhaps better than anyone how thin the line was between the person you wanted to be and the person you became. He found Sarah waiting for him outside the courthouse. "Well?" she asked. "She told the truth, all of it." He took her hand. "I don't know if that makes her good or just desperate, but the information she gave will save lives." "Does that matter?" "In the end." Marcus thought about it. About Elena's dead niece, about his dead teammates, about all the ghosts that walked beside the living. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I think maybe it has to. Otherwise, what's the point of any of it?" Sarah squeezed his hand. "That's the most hopeful thing I've ever heard you say. Don't get used to it." But he was smiling when he said it. A real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. And somewhere across the city in a federal prison, Elena Vasquez sat alone in her cell and thought about a baby's cry in a blizzard. It was the last human sound she'd ever chosen to protect. She hoped someday it would be enough. 6 months later, Marcus stood in front of a classroom of 24 SEAL candidates. They were young. God, they were young. Faces that hadn't been weathered by war yet. Eyes that still believed in simple heroism and clean victories. They looked at him the way he'd once looked at his own instructors, with fear and awe and desperate hope. He wondered how many of them would survive their first real mission. "My name is Lieutenant Cole," he said. "Some of you have heard stories about what happened in the Cascades. Forget them. Stories are entertainment. What I'm going to teach you is survival." A hand went up in the back row. Young kid, maybe 22, with the eager look of someone who thought he already knew everything. "Sir, is it true you killed 11 men single-handedly while protecting a baby?" Marcus let the silence stretch. The kid's confidence began to waver. "No," Marcus said finally. "I killed 8. My dog killed 2. The pilot I was protecting killed 1. He paused. "And I didn't do it single-handedly. I did it because I had people worth protecting and a partner I could trust with my life." He walked to the front of his desk, letting them see the scars, the slight limp that would never fully heal, the cost of survival written on his body. "That's lesson 1. There's no such thing as a solo hero. Every victory, every rescue, every moment you come home alive, it's because someone had your back. Forget that and you'll die alone wondering why no one came to save you." The classroom was silent now. The eager kid had stopped smiling. Lesson 2. Marcus pulled up a photograph on the screen behind him. Lily Chen smiling at the camera birthday cake in front of her. "This is why we fight. Not for medals, not for glory, not for the politicians who send us into hell and forget our names. We fight for the people who can't fight for themselves." He looked at each face in turn, memorizing them, knowing that some would become warriors, and some would wash out, and some would die in places their families would never know about. If you can't look at this picture and know in your gut that you'd die for this child even though you've never met her, then you're in the wrong room. Leave now, no shame in it. But don't waste my time or yours. No one moved. Marcus nodded slowly. "Good. Then let's begin." After class, Sarah found him in his office, staring at the photograph he'd shown the candidates. "James sent a new one this morning," she said, dropping a folder on his desk. "Lily took her first steps yesterday. Michelle got it on video." Marcus picked up the folder. Inside was a printed screenshot from the video. Lily, 14 months old now, wobbling on unsteady legs, arms outstretched toward her father. "She looks happy," he said quietly. "She is happy. Because of you. Because of all of us." Sarah sat on the edge of his desk. She'd taken the Quantico position, was teaching flight tactics 3 buildings away. They'd found an apartment between the base and the training facility, a small place with a yard for Titan and enough room for 2 people learning how to be together. It wasn't perfect. They fought sometimes. Marcus still had nightmares that woke them both. Sarah still struggled with the limitations of her rebuilt leg. But it was theirs. And that mattered. "The Navy called again," Sarah said. "About the commendation ceremony." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I told them no." "I know. They're not accepting no." She touched his hand. "Marcus, they want to give you the Navy Cross. That's not something you can just refuse. Watch me." "Why?" Her voice was gentle but firm. "Why is it so hard for you to accept that what you did was extraordinary?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "Because I don't want to be a symbol. I don't want politicians shaking my hand and using my story to justify their wars. I don't want to stand on a stage and pretend that what happened was anything other than desperate people trying not to die." "Is that really why?" He looked at her. She always saw through him. It was terrifying and comforting in equal measure. "No," he admitted. "It's because I don't feel like a hero. I feel like a man who got lucky, who should have died a dozen times and somehow didn't." His voice dropped. "The real heroes are the ones who didn't come home, from Syria, from every mission before that. They deserve the medals. Not me." Sarah took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. Listen to me, Marcus Cole. Those men, your teammates, they didn't die so you could spend the rest of your life feeling guilty. They died because they believed in the mission just like you did. And the best way to honor them isn't to hide from recognition. It's to stand up and show the world what they fought for. I don't know how to do that. Then learn. She kissed his forehead. You're teaching these kids how to be warriors. Part of that is teaching them how to carry the weight of survival. How to accept that they lived when others didn't. You can't teach what you won't face yourself. Marcus closed his eyes. The faces of his dead teammates swam in the darkness. Rodriguez, who had a daughter he'd never met. Kim, who'd been 3 weeks from retirement. Jefferson, who had saved Marcus's life twice before Marcus had gotten him killed. I see them, he whispered. Every day, every night, I see their faces and I wonder why I'm still here. I know. Sarah's voice was steady. And you'll probably see them for the rest of your life. But that doesn't mean you have to stop living. It means you have to live enough for all of them. A knock at the door interrupted them. One of the training staff poked his head in. Lieutenant Cole, there's someone here to see you. Says her name is Elena Vasquez. Marcus went rigid. Sarah's hand tightened on his shoulder. Send her away, Sarah said quickly. No. Marcus's voice was calm, but something hard had entered his eyes. Send her in. The staff member hesitated, then nodded and disappeared. Marcus, you don't have to do this. Yes, I do. He stood moving around the desk. I've been avoiding this for 6 months. Time to stop running. Elena entered the office slowly. She looked different from the courtroom smaller. Somehow the orange jumpsuit replaced by civilian clothes that seemed too large for her frame. Her immunity deal had included early release for her cooperation. She was a free woman now if freedom meant anything when you had nowhere to go. Lieutenant Cole. Her voice was careful, controlled. Thank you for seeing me. I didn't do it for you. I did it for me. Marcus gestured to a chair. Sit. She sat. Sarah remained standing, positioned between Elena and Marcus, her body language making clear she would act if needed. I know you hate me, Elena said. You have every right to. I helped plan the operation. I tracked you through the blizzard. People died because of choices I made. Is this an apology? Would it matter if it was no? Marcus's voice was flat. Words don't bring back the dead. They don't heal the woman sitting next to me. They don't undo the terror you put a 7-month-old baby through. Elena flinched but didn't look away. Then why did you agree to see me? Marcus was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice had changed. Softer but somehow more dangerous. Because I needed to understand. The night you shot that man, the one with the grenade. Why, I told the court, you told the court about your niece, about hearing Lily cry. I'm not asking for the sanitized version. Marcus leaned forward. I'm asking what it felt like, in that moment, when you chose to betray everything you'd built your life around. Elena's composure cracked. Just slightly. Just enough to show the human being beneath the soldier. It felt like dying, she said quietly. Like everything I thought I knew was wrong. Like I'd spent my whole life building a house on sand and suddenly the tide was coming in. And after terror, running through the blizzard knowing Viper would kill me if he caught me. Then relief when I heard the helicopters. Then... She stopped. Then what? Grief. Her voice broke. Not for the mission. For all the years I wasted being someone I didn't want to be. For all the choices I made that led me to a mountain where I had to decide whether to let a baby burn. Marcus studied her face, searching for deception, for manipulation, for any sign that this was another game. He found only exhaustion, and a pain that mirrored his own. I don't forgive you, he said finally. I know. I may never forgive you. I know that too. But, Marcus paused, choosing his words carefully. I understand. The choices that feel like survival. The compromises that pile up until you don't recognize yourself anymore. I understand how someone becomes what you became. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back furiously. Is that enough? She asked. Understanding without forgiveness. It's going to have to be, for both of us. Marcus stood, signaling the end of the conversation. What are you going to do now? I don't know. I have no family, no friends, no skills except killing. She laughed bitterly. Not exactly resume material. The FBI might disagree. You have contacts, knowledge, insight into networks they've been trying to penetrate for years. You think I should become an informant? I think you should become useful. Find a way to balance the scales even if they'll never be even. Marcus opened the door. That's what I'm trying to do. Every day. With every candidate I train. Elena rose slowly. At the door, she stopped. The baby. Lily. Is she? She took her first steps yesterday. She's happy. Healthy. Loved. Something shifted in Elena's face. Something that might have been peace. Good, she said softly. That's good. She walked out without looking back. Sarah exhaled slowly. That was unexpected. Which part? All of it. The compassion, the advice. She shook her head. You're a complicated man, Marcus Cole. I'm a tired man, there's a difference. He pulled her close. But I'm learning that tired doesn't mean finished. It just means you need new reasons to keep going. And what are your reasons? Marcus looked at the photograph of Lily on his desk, at the woman in his arms, at Titan sleeping in the corner, his gray muzzle twitching as he dreamed. Everything, he said. Everything I almost lost. Everything I didn't know I wanted until it was almost too late. 1 year to the day after the siege, the Chens threw a party. It was small, intimate, just family, and the few friends who knew the real story behind their daughter's survival. The backyard was filled with balloons and laughter, and the shrieks of a toddler discovering the joy of being chased by a very patient Belgian Malinois. Marcus stood apart, watching. He'd never been comfortable at parties. Too many people. Too many expectations of small talk and social niceties that felt foreign to him. But he was here. That mattered. She loves that dog. James appeared beside him, holding 2 beers. He offered one to Marcus. Every time you visit, she talks about Titan for days afterward. He's good with kids. Better than me. Somehow I doubt that. James clinked his bottle against Marcus's. Thank you. I know I've said it before, but thank you. For everything. You don't have to keep thanking me. Maybe not. But I want to. James was quiet for a moment, watching his daughter toddle after Titan. When I found out what had happened, when the FBI told us our baby had been shot down in a helicopter and was being hunted by mercenaries, I thought my life was over. I thought we'd lost her. You didn't. Because of you. Because a stranger heard a distress call and decided to run toward the danger instead of away from it. James turned to face him. I've spent my whole life studying numbers, data, patterns, trying to understand how the world works through mathematics. But what you did, that doesn't fit any equation, I know. It's something beyond analysis. It's called being too stubborn to die. James laughed. Maybe. Or maybe it's called grace. He put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Either way, I'm grateful for it. And my daughter, when she's old enough to understand, she'll be grateful too. Sarah joined them, slipping her hand into Marcus's. Michelle wants to do the cake. Lily's getting impatient. They gathered around the table, the small group of people who knew the truth about the mountain. The FBI agents who had responded to Sarah's desperate transmission. The doctors who had saved Marcus's life. The lawyers who had put the conspirators behind bars. And at the center of it all, a 2-year-old girl with chestnut hair and bright blue eyes, completely unaware of the storm she had survived. "Make a wish, sweetheart," Michelle said, holding Lily up to the candles. The little girl took a deep breath and blew. The candles flickered out. Everyone cheered. But Lily wasn't looking at the cake. She was looking at Marcus, at the man with the scars and the sad eyes, who always stood a little apart from everyone else. She reached for him. Not her father. Not her mother. Him. "Up," she demanded. "Up, up." Marcus hesitated. He'd held her before briefly, awkwardly, but this was different. This was a choice. Hers and his. He took her from Michelle's arms. Lily snuggled against his chest, her small hand finding his collar and holding tight. She looked up at him with complete trust. "Cake," she said solemnly. Marcus felt something give way inside him. The last wall, the final defense he'd built around a heart too battered to risk loving anything again. "Okay," he said, his voice rough. "Let's get you some cake." Sarah watched them walk toward the table, the scarred warrior and the child he'd saved. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. James put an arm around his wife. Michelle was crying too. "He's going to be okay," Michelle said softly. "I wasn't sure before, but now I think he's really going to be okay." "They both are," James agreed. "Sometimes the people who save us end up being saved themselves." Later that night, after the party was over and Lily was asleep, Marcus sat in the Chen's backyard with Titan at his feet. The dog was getting older. His muzzle was more gray than brown now, and he moved slower than he used to. But his eyes were still sharp, still watching, still ready to protect, if needed. "We did good, boy," Marcus said quietly. "You and me. We did good." Titan's tail thumped against the grass. Sarah found them there, 2 warriors in the darkness standing guard over a sleeping house. "Ready to go home?" she asked. Home. The word still felt strange in Marcus's mouth, but it was getting easier. "Yeah," he said. "I'm ready." They walked to the car together, Titan padding between them. Sarah took Marcus's hand. "I've been thinking," she said. "Dangerous habit," she laughed. "About what you said to those SEAL candidates, about fighting for people who can't fight for themselves." "What about it?" "I think you've been doing that your whole life. Fighting for others, protecting strangers, throwing yourself into danger because someone needed saving." She stopped, turning to face him. "But you never let anyone fight for you, never let anyone protect you." "I didn't think I deserved it. And now..." Marcus looked at her. At the woman who had bled beside him in a cabin, who had shot a sniper to save his life, who had held his hand through nightmares and dragged him back from the edge when the darkness got too deep. "Now I think maybe I was wrong. About a lot of things. That might be the most growth I've ever seen from you. Don't get used to it." But he was smiling when he said it. Really smiling. Sarah kissed him under the stars, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Marcus Cole felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The trial of Viktor Kozlov ended 3 weeks later. Guilty on all counts. Life without parole. The courtroom erupted when the verdict was read, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing. Marcus watched from the back row. He'd been asked to speak at the sentencing to describe what he'd faced on that mountain. He'd refused, but he came anyway. He needed to see it end. Viper Victor, whoever he was, looked smaller in chains. The confidence was gone, the cold professionalism replaced by the hollow expression of a man who knew he would die in a cell. Their eyes met across the courtroom, just for a moment. Marcus expected to feel satisfaction, vindication, the sweet taste of justice finally served. Instead, he felt nothing, just emptiness where the hatred had been. It was over, really over. The conspiracy dismantled, the betrayers punished, the child safe. He could finally let it go. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Marcus ducked through a side exit, avoiding the cameras. Sarah was waiting with the car. "How do you feel?" she asked as he climbed in. "Empty, but not in a bad way, like I've been carrying something heavy and finally set it down." "That's called peace, Marcus." "Is that what it is?" He leaned back in the seat, closing his eyes. "I'm not sure I'd recognize it." "You'll learn." She started the car. "We both will." Titan barked once from the back seat, his tail wagging. "See," Sarah laughed. "Even the dog agrees." They drove home through streets that seemed brighter somehow, past houses full of families, past parks full of children, past all the ordinary miracles that Marcus had spent his life protecting without ever stopping to appreciate. He appreciated them now. Every one. The Navy Cross ceremony was held on a Tuesday. Marcus stood at attention, while a 3-star admiral pinned the medal to his chest. The words washed over him formal phrases about valor and sacrifice and service above self. He thought about Rodriguez, Kim, Jefferson. He thought about Sarah, sitting in the front row wiping tears from her eyes. He thought about Lily, who couldn't be here, but had sent a drawing, a crayon scribble, that her parents swore was supposed to be him and Titan. When the Admiral finished speaking, Marcus stepped to the microphone. He hadn't prepared a speech, hadn't known what he would say until this moment. "This medal doesn't belong to me," he said, his voice steady. "It belongs to the men who died, so I could be here. To the pilot who fought beside me with a broken leg. To a dog who took bullets meant for a child. To everyone who runs toward danger when running away would be easier." He looked out at the crowd, young SEALs in uniform, veterans with gray hair and knowing eyes, families who had sent their sons and daughters into wars they didn't understand. I spent a long time believing I wasn't worth saving, that the ghosts I carried made me damaged beyond repair. But someone taught me that we honor the dead by living, by continuing to fight for what matters, by refusing to let the darkness win. His eyes found Sarah. She was smiling through her tears. "So this medal, I accept it for all of them, for the warriors who came before and the ones who will come after, for the innocent lives we protect and the sacrifices we make to protect them." He touched the medal on his chest. "And for a little girl who will never know how many people fought to give her a chance to grow up." He stepped back from the microphone. The audience rose in applause, but Marcus barely heard them. He was already walking toward Sarah, toward the life they were building together, toward a future he'd never believed he would have. Titan waited by the door, the old warrior gray and slow now, but still standing guard. Marcus knelt and pressed his forehead against the dog's. "We made it, boy," he whispered. "We actually made it." Titan licked his face, his tail wagged. And Marcus Cole, the man who had charged through blizzards and bullets to save a stranger's child, finally let himself believe that he was home. Sometimes the fiercest battles we fight are not against enemies we can see, but against the darkness we carry within ourselves. The fear that tells us we are not worthy of love, the guilt that says we should have died instead, the walls we build to protect hearts too wounded to risk breaking again. But grace finds us anyway, in the cry of a child, in the loyalty of a dog, in the hand of someone brave enough to reach through our defenses and refuse to let go. Marcus Cole spent 15 years running from his past. He found his future in a blizzard, protecting a baby he had never met, fighting beside a woman he had just met, trusting a dog who had never once let him down. He found his purpose in that cabin, his peace in the aftermath, his home in the arms of a family he never expected to have. And when his own children asked him years later why he had charged toward certain death instead of waiting for backup, he told them the truth. Because some things are worth dying for, and some people are worth living for. The trick is learning to tell the difference. Lily Chen grew up knowing the story, knowing that a stranger had bled for her, that a dog had stood between her and bullets, that a pilot with a broken leg had refused to stop fighting. She grew up brave, kind, fierce in the defense of those who couldn't defend themselves. She grew up to be exactly the person Marcus had saved her to become. And every year on this anniversary of the blizzard, she called the man she considered her second father and said 2 words: "Thank you." Every year Marcus answered with the same 2 words: "Worth it." Because it was. Every scar, every nightmare, every moment of doubt and pain and fear. All of it worth it. For her, for Sarah, for the life he had finally learned to embrace. For the simple truth that love is stronger than fear, loyalty is stronger than death, and hope is stronger than any storm that tries to bury it. That is the lesson of the mountain. That is the legacy of the siege. That is the story of a Navy SEAL, his faithful dog, and the baby they saved from the blizzard. And it is not just their story. It is ours. Every time we choose courage over comfort, every time we reach for someone who is drowning, every time we stand between evil and innocence and refuse to move, we become part of it, part of them, part of something larger than ourselves. So the next time you hear a cry in the darkness, the next time you see someone who needs saving, the next time life asks you to choose between safety and sacrifice, remember Marcus Cole, remember Titan, remember Lily, and run toward the storm.